All right. Welcome back, everyone. We really appreciate you being on here. Thanks again. This is Jeff Lambert coming to you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. However you're digesting and absorbing the information today, we appreciate your following. We appreciate your trust and being a valued listener and a viewer for us. Today, I want to welcome Dr. Jose Flores, a very special guest today. He is incredibly important in the West Michigan Hispanic community. I could give you a 5-minute intro and a bio like some of the top tier guys do. I'll be there someday. Or I could just, open it up to you, let you know, give us a little bit of history on yourself. Tell us about where you've been. Tell us about what you're doing right now and what your intentions for the future are. A little bit about your education background, a little bit about your professional history, and we'll kind of open it up. We've got some questions and we'll get to know you a little bit better. So, Dr. Flores.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, Jeff. Appreciate what you're doing for West Michigan and certainly for the global community, as we are certainly in a cyberspace
We are.
communication network here. And so you never know how far reaching your efforts will actually extend. But I'm certain that someone's watching,
Yeah.
and certainly a higher power involved in your motivation and in your purpose. So congratulations. I am Jose Flores. Oftentimes the first question that comes to people's minds is, where are you from? Who are you and where are you from? So I'm one of the children of native born United States citizens, my mother and father, but whose grandparents came whose parents came during World War I to the United States, and and we located in Texas. Came up here at an early age of 3 years old to Michigan, following the migrant farm worker stream, and settled out here in Grand Rapids. I really know is Grand Rapids. I've been to Texas a couple of times and just to visit family and whatnot. But my experience has been West Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan. I graduated from Central High School, went off to Eastern Michigan University, earned my bachelor's in education with a focus on U.S. history and an interest in bilingual education. Was quite an activist on campus. Worked during those days for the civil rights movement. I was what we called ourselves a Chicano, Mexican American who understood his place in America and was, basically dedicated myself to eliminating some of the stereotypes, some of the disenfranchisement that goes on in the country with respect to economic and political power, and wanted to change things. I wanted to increase the number of Hispanic Americans. We use that term today: Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, whatever you want to call us. In those days, it was a Chicano, and we wanted to increase the number of Chicanos on campus, increase the number of Hispanic Americans that could benefit from education and contribute to our society. And that has kind of been, a purpose that I've had that stuck with me lifelong. It's how can I impact a community with the knowledge that I gained at Eastern Michigan University with my bachelor's. Came back, worked for Grand Rapids Public Schools as a teacher, and thereby implementing a lot of those ideas. I felt that the recognition of U.S. history and what role we play in the development, or played in the development of this country, and also today play every day in making sure this country reflects us all, and and that they recognize that we're an integral part of the people and in the United States, and that we serve in every capacity, that we've served in every defense of the nation, that we have a very detailed history in the United States. And I brought that back to the classroom in teaching young people to be proud of themselves, no matter where they came from, to live with purpose. And then I earned my master's at at Grand Valley State University, and as I was taught for 17 years, kind of a mixed service, because in the middle of my career, I went into administration and served as the instructional and administrative leader for bilingual education, migrant education, immigrant education, Native American education, and what we called compensatory education, targeting students that were behind. And in that capacity, I was the control officer for about $5 million for the district, traveled all over the country, met people from various educational backgrounds, and with very innovative ideas, brought back 6 national excellence programs to Grand Rapids, focusing in on different educational approaches to try to impact the children that had the most severe learning disadvantage, if you will. And so we then initiated programs for them, and they were very successful. We set up what was called a clinical school, so that you could practice different trends in education, different models of reaching kids, and such as distance learning, such as theme-based education, such as kinesthetic approaches to educating children, as examples. Okay, we then implemented distance learning. We were the first to bring in computers that had digitized voice in English and Spanish to work with preschoolers through high school. And in doing so, of course, you build programs, and of course there's always people who are for some reason not impressed with you, or not impressed with what you do. We call them the haters, right?
Can't please everybody.
Yeah, everybody. And so even though we built a very unique program, involved Wayne State University professors, put them here on site to teach our teachers how to teach, and to meaning that to teach in different ways, because we all, we're very capable of teaching, but to teach with different models and with a reflective practice in mind. And so, that doctoral team, we set up kind of a pyramid structure, with the doctoral professors teaching the master's level teachers, and then the master's level teachers could impact the bachelor level teachers who were working toward their master's and their bilingual education endorsements. And it worked marvelously, marvelously. We had a very unique program, and I wound up writing my dissertation on the impact of that program on migrant children.
Hold on, you did all of this while you were working on your master's?
Yes, while I was working on my doctorate.
Oh, okay.
While I was working on my doctorate, I earned my master's from Grand Valley State University in education, with a focus on bilingual education, while I was working with the district as a teacher. So, I never stopped learning. I really believe that, we have to live with purpose. And one of the things that I saw in education was that there was an underrepresentation of Hispanic Americans in teaching and in administration. And yet there was a dramatic increase of students in the district taking place annually, that we needed to close the gap between people of color in the classroom, in the front of the classroom as teachers, and people of color in administration, and including Hispanic Americans, to better match the population that is being served.
So just in simple terms, so I make sure I'm understanding, a lot of Hispanic American students, not so many in education that are teaching the students.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Okay. During that time and to present, we went from being a very small population, somewhere around 3%, to today, where we're about 39%, where in fact we are the largest minority group in the Grand Rapids Public Schools.
And you're saying Hispanic Americans is encompassing all
all Hispanic,
Mexicans,
Latino.
Cubans, and any Latino. Yeah. So I mean, that's me. My mother was born in Cuba, in Havana. So
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So when we do that, then we can empower these children. But the absence of recognition that these children are important, that they must be educated, that they must have the resources to follow them, that they must recognize that their language is an asset and not a deficit. All those things come from a change in mentality by the leadership of a district, from superintendent or from board of education on down to the classroom. Otherwise, you're not going to uplift these children. And if you do not uplift these children, they have become a critical mass. No longer can we say, well, they're only 3%. No, they're nearly half of the population that you have to serve. If you fail to reach them and teach them, if you fail to accelerate their learning, if you fail to increase their success, then the whole system is impacted. All of your numbers are flat. You're an ineffective school district if you cannot reach and teach and educate properly the children that are represented in this mass, this critical mass of students. So getting people to understand that and to accept that and to eliminate their inbred biases has been one of the greatest obstacles that I have faced in my educational career.
Okay.
I'm elected to the Board of Education, re-elected to the Board of Education, so I'm in my second term. And I have had to fight an uphill battle just to get on the board and then to retain my seat on the board and to impact the colleagues on the board that I work with and the administration.
So
Go ahead.
I was just going to, building on that. So we talked a little bit about the disproportionate numbers between the number of Latino Americans, Hispanic American students versus teachers that they can relate to. Was there aside from that being a disadvantage, were the students, I'm going to use it because you had said Native Americans as well.
Yes.
Was there an educational disadvantage as well, where they were behind educationally at some point when you started implementing this, you started to work toward this? Was there a great, the majority of your Caucasian students in the area were, B and A students, and the majority, the non-relatable minority students for this term, we'll just use that term right now.
Yes.
The Latino students were more of like C and D students because of the lack of relatability?
Exactly.
Okay.
And there was not a methodological approach to eliminating the instructional gap that existed between majority students and minority students. And that's what we targeted. And the resources weren't there, nor was the commitment.
Okay.
Even today, we're looking at a district that is struggling with issues of equity and equality. That
blows my mind, because I know that the population is continued, like you said, from 3 to 39, 4. It's probably a little bit more than that, maybe at this point, but it's staggering what you just said. Well, after my almost 40 years acknowledging that, and it's still like it's so off.
Sure, and then Americans will ask, well, why aren't these children learning? Or they think we're all immigrants from yesterday that we just crossed the border. And that's the stereotype we have to change. Many of us were here before the United States became the United States. We are descendants of the original indigenous people who were here throughout the Americas. The Western Hemisphere was we'll use the word discovered, okay? Discovered and colonized. It was conquered and colonized. The people were conquered and colonized. And we continue to have that mentality of a colonized race in the Americas. Those indigenous people that are made up of the Mexicans and the Cuban Americans and the Puerto Ricans and the Dominicans and the Colombians and the Venezuelans and the Costa Ricans and the Guatemalans and the Mexicans and then all of the Indian groups of the Americas. And I always say to people, if you really know your American history, you know, list 10 Native American groups. Let's start with the Apache, the Yaqui, the Navajo, the Hopi, the Wampanoag, the Pima, the Crow, the Sioux, the Cheyenne, you know, the Huron, the Potawatomi, and on, the Osceola, you name them. If you know your history, your American history, you'll know that we were involved in every major defense of the United States, even the Revolutionary War for Independence. We're people that have never denied our Americanism. And that needs to be taught to our children so that they can identify with this nation and the values of this nation. And in every aspect, from politics to religion to sports to art to I think I said education, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have contributed to military defense. We've contributed. And so those are the kinds of uplifting messages that we have to give to our kids so that they can feel empowered. And you know, earlier we were talking before the show about living with purpose. Well, that is a purpose. And that's one that I've carried, you know, front and center in my teaching and in my advocacy and in my role in the community, is to try to change the images that people have about our population so that we can somehow live harmoniously with other groups. Because if you do not know who you are, you cannot appreciate the contributions of others.
Sure.
And so, you know, I made sure I took American history, which is basically history of a white majority.
Kind of the European coming in, because everything you were talking about with Native Americans, all the different, the Native Americans, the tribals, so you name them, I wouldn't be able to give you 10. And I bet 99% of the people out there, if you were to take a microphone to the streets, like some popular TV shows, you get the same thing. People would name the same 3 or 4, and they'd go, I don't know.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's really, you know.
So if you empower people and you give them those those basic knowledge of the cultural groups that make up this mosaic of Americans that we have in the population, and you teach them Native American history, you teach them African American history, teach them Hispanic or Chicano, Mexican American history, and Cuban, Latin American history, right? You're able to then give them a sense of belonging, you know, a sense of belonging, and you're able to remove the stereotypes that they have to combat every day. And so, you know, it takes away that notion of people saying, you know, go back to where you came from. You know, oftentimes when people say to me, go back to where you came from, I say, well, you know, I don't have very far to go, you know. If on
I
my
feel
span,
like that's just, I'm sorry, man, I'm going to call it out. That's just a white ignorance thing is
Yeah.
what we look at it. And that's all. I'm just going to leave it at that. I mean, we could go into, yeah, I'm just, yeah.
Yeah,
I've heard that when people find out that I don't get it a lot, because I guess I have the features of a little bit of both, Caucasian and Hispanic. And it's not glaringly Hispanic, but people have said that to me in the past in slightly derogatory terms, you know, send your mom back to where she came from. Kind of like, are you kidding me?
yeah.
No, man, she's been in this city longer than your parents have been alive. You know, what are you talking about? Anyway.
Exactly. And I've always asked people, well, how many generations is it going to take for my people to become American?
So I want to kind of go back up to this here. So this has been, it sounds like a lifelong thing for you, at least since college, probably before then. When did you feel like this was your purpose to empower people? When did you feel like this was like, I need to do this, nobody else is doing it? Or maybe that wasn't your feeling.
Well, yes, it was. I started very young. It was, you know, I was actually about 16 or 17 years old when I became involved in civic activism here in Grand Rapids, and it was during the Civil Rights Movement. So I was involved with the Cesar Chavez boycott of lettuce and grapes. I was involved with protesting against the war in Vietnam. You know, I was involved in and pushing for bilingual and multicultural education studies in the colleges, and increasing our presence in colleges. Came back to Grand Rapids and helped form the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan. Helped form actually, they call me a co-founder of the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan, and the Hispanic Festival that's held annually downtown. There again, focusing in on Americanism, on our participation in role in this country, and trying to promote a positive recognition of our culture as being part of the American mosaic of cultures. And so in doing that, and then bilingual education, all those fit into my purpose. And I always advise people, live with purpose. What is your purpose?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And looking at it now in retrospect, I gave up making, the hundreds of thousands of dollars that I probably could have made in real estate, or could have made in construction, or could have made in teaching, or in a law profession per se, or some other more lucrative area of concentration. But I have impacted thousands of children who have now become adults, who now have their own children. And so when I look at that, and I'm often confronted with people who I taught, who will tell me, after giving me a hug and showing their appreciation for me, they tell me that I made a big difference in their lives, and that is certainly rewarding. And it's not money, but it's rewarding. And I
feel like I feel like, sorry to interrupt, but that's so much. I mean, money is to chase money is not a good thing. It can be used as a tool for these things, but to get that response in feedback, however many years, a decade or more later, from those that you've taught, say you impacted me more than or about as much as anybody else, and then they're able to impact their own children. And it's just kind of like that pyramid model you said, the doctoral teaching, the master teaching, that it's like you,
right,
and then branching out to all of your students, the students, these kind of things. And that's been something, I mean, several decades of your life, the majority of your life at this point, I'm assuming, has been a huge thing. Now, when your shift from being an actual educator, a teacher in the classroom, to administration, was that to expand your capability to reach more people, to make a bigger difference in the community and influence more schools than just the one you were in?
Yes, I saw it as an opportunity to impact the masses, and
Okay.
I made that conscientious decision to do so. And when I went in as director of bilingual education, we had something like 13 staff, and we were, actually about $300,000 in the red. And I took that program to 5 million in the black, and to 125, at least 125 staff. And what I did was I also impacted the district by creating a vehicle where tutors that were, or college level students, and community members that had not previously been recruited into the ranks of teachers or parapros were able to come in as professional tutors. And we put those tutors in buildings where they had a large concentration of children who were learning English, who were not as adept in English. Today they're called English language learners. But back then they were called limited English proficient students. And so It made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And with programs like that, you can impact a greater number of students. And so that my impact was felt. Now, having as many students as I did, excuse me, that are now adults in the community, when I ran for Grand Rapids Public Schools to become a board member, it was an easy election. I spent $500 my first run, approximately $500, and others joined together to try to defeat me and I still was elected. And then when I ran for re-election, I had a slate of board members who opposed me, who ran, who to my exclusion, who spent, I don't know, 10, 15 grand.
Significant amount of money, yeah.
Significant amount of money. And I spent maybe 2 grand, but I outpaced all of them. Or not all of them, but, you know, because there was a Me Too movement, and the females came out great, you know, and I don't mind being second to females that were elected. But certainly those who orchestrated the slate, who have power on the board, traditional power, I outperformed them. And so that sent them a message too.
Now, why do you feel that you outperformed them?
Well, I outperformed them in terms of the number of votes cast for me as opposed for them.
Okay.
So I beat them in numbers.
Okay.
And so that was kind of, I think, a slap in the face to them, because, you know, we live in a system
that happened twice. You outperformed.
Yeah, twice. Yeah, we live in a system where white male privilege is associated with governance. And individuals like that were present on the board, still are.
Okay.
And we're able to carry the day politically in creating opposition to me and to my ideas.
Sure.
Because I'm an advocate, I'm a reformer. And I don't believe that you should just be placed in educational roles because of your color or because of political cronyism or because of nepotism. And I'm opposed to nepotism. I'm opposed to cronyism. And I support quality instruction through competent individuals, and you must be competent in order to be in a classroom or be an administrative role or a leadership role. And I won't back off of that.
Good, good. So you had mentioned in the past, you had talked about being 16 years old, participating in just being active and all that. Who primarily influenced you? I have to believe, but without knowing the answer, I don't want to assume anything, that your parents may have had a role in influencing you and starting your civil activities.
Well, my first organization was called the Mexican American Youth Organization, MAYO.
Okay.
And we were basically influenced by civil rights activists that, from what I understand, went all over the country, targeted from or beginning from Texas, where the kind of Mexican American youth movement sprung out of. But in doing research later, I see that it was really part of a national movement. Colorado, California, Arizona, all of these Southwest or Western states actually had young people rising up in numbers and organizing. So much like the youth today in many of the movements, it was part of a national movement. And so.
And this was far before social media, anything like that.
Far before social media, yeah.
So if there were three key people or 3 key elements that influenced you the most, what or who would those be?
Well, it would be from the MAYO organization, the guy who taught us about Chicano and the Chicano movement. His name was Gonzalo Moya, and I'll remember that for the rest of my life, because he was a good influence in getting me involved. But then there were national leaders that I respected, you know, Cesar Chavez and voices out there like Corky Gonzalez that I researched, and Jose Angel Gutierrez, people who during those days were very big activists, and there was even Mario Campion and others that started La Raza Unida Party, and I studied that, and then I read a lot. You know, I read books about African Americans too, and leaders that were involved in the movement. So just that whole civil rights package of voices, and allowed me to I guess define myself. You know, you never really want to be someone else. You want to be able to sort out ideas that people people have, and then see what fits with your own perspectives and your own values. But there was another person who impacted my life, and his name was Carlos Falcon, and he was a recruiter for Eastern Michigan University. And had he not visited our high school and demanded to speak with all of the Hispanic students, I would probably never have gone to the university.
So dare I say, him doing that led you to do what you're doing.
Yes.
From the relatability standpoint.
Yes.
That's awesome, man. Can you imagine if he never did? I mean,
I would probably be working in a factory, or maybe retired. Because I worked in factories. I'm a workaholic. From working in the fields to working in restaurants to working in factories, and to becoming a teacher, and then a professional, and then a volunteer community agency director, and grants writer. I mean, I learned all of the different skills, and then I launched my magazine.
Let's talk about that for a minute. La Voz?
Yeah, La Voz. Actually, the community voice La Voz was launched with a young man named Tito Veneza, who worked with us at the Hispanic Center. And he and I sat down and we talked about, an idea of doing a newsletter for the Hispanic Center. And it flourished from our conversations. We said, let's do a little bit bigger, and he was a motivator too. And he went on to get his doctorate in multicultural education. So he's out there too. He was selling Shackley.
The supplements, the vitamins? Yeah.
Supplements and all of the different products. And he and his wife really did well. They really did well with that program. Went on to become, diamond level or whatever, one of those higher levels in it. But during that time, he was very, very strong with Spanish. And so we made a bilingual publication for the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan. We ran that for a long time. After I left the Hispanic Center, after 10 years of service, they were going to allow it to just die. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't let them just let it die. So I bought it and took it and privatized it and used it as an educational tool, as a political tool, and as a cultural educational tool. And so it continues today. It thrives. It sends the positive messages. It helps a lot of people. It advocates for those who do not have those voices that are being heard. I have writers from different parts of the country, Alabama, California. I have a writer in Puerto Rico, a writer in Mexico, people that across the state who contribute their editorials on a number of topics. We're both conservative and liberal, religious and secular. So we cover the gamut of opinions.
Nice. Well, we're getting close to time here. I know that you've got some things that you got to do. I got a couple final questions. I feel like we could do a part 2 and probably a part 3 because you've got a lot that you can speak of, and it's a wonderful, wonderful. Everything that you're doing is awesome, I think. And I appreciate you being on the show here. So there's a couple things that I wrote down that I don't think we have time for. I want to kind of close it out in a proper way, though. If you could step into my shoes and ask a question that I haven't asked, what would that question be?
Jeffrey, you asked earlier, a real big question. You said, well, how involved are you with religion? And God.
Before we jumped on and recorded. Yep.
Right, before we, I said, we're all sinners, and we are all, perhaps not as deserving of the Lord's grace. But, the Lord is very much a part of my life, and my relationship with Him is a one-to-one relationship. And I'm not the first in church every Sunday. I'm not, involved as a deacon or any leadership role. The church is important, but more so speaking to God, humbling yourself before Him, and giving Him praise. I think that is important. God has sent me angels throughout my life in every action where I have had a conflict or controversy or a setback. And I can think even this past week where I have benefited from praying, from giving Him praise, where I didn't expect that benefit, but certainly I given Him that thanks every day for the life that He gives us, and thanking Him for whatever purpose it is that He has me here for. And I know my own purpose. I try to live with purpose. And many times I'm there working at my store, because I also have a little store, and people come to me to ask for my help. And I'm either the resource, or I am the advice that they need, or I am that action agent that I have to act on their behalf in order to help them. But I really believe that God is sending them angels, and I happen to be that angel at that point.
Yeah.
Just as He has sent to me angels in my life when I have really needed those angels. And there are many times where I have needed them, believe me. And so
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I really, that's a wonderful message, and that's ultimately what my intention is to share that message with people in the community and from people in the community as well. A couple final things here. So as far as people being able to reach out to you, communicate you, get more information on the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan, the Hispanic Festival, the Community Voice, and your store, how do you have online resources? Are you on all social media? How can we connect with you?
We have a website at www.lavozweb.com, and certainly anyone can email me at drjflores1@gmail.com, and I don't mind people calling me if they want to call me. 616-581-6271. But and I don't work just 8 to 5. I work out.
Workaholics never do.
I'm available. So yeah, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Jeffrey. I'm honored to be part of your show, and certainly to meet you. Jose Infante, you said he's your uncle?
Yeah, he is my uncle. Yeah, we talked about that ahead of the show.
Jose Infante and I, we worked at the Hispanic Center as board members, and contributed our time and our knowledge base to the development of that organization. And Jose is a successful administrator in the bank, and I think it's which bank is he with?
I'm not sure where he's with now, but I know Community Shores Bank was a big one several years ago. It's probably 10 years removed at this point, but yeah.
But he always had that banking and finance background that we needed at that time. So he was one of those angels that God assembled in our administrative organization there at the Hispanic Center. Thank him too.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's an opportunity for a part 2, and if you're open to it, we can work on that at some point too, because there's a lot of things that I had intended to ask that we just didn't, with time restrictions, not able to cover. As we close out here, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I know our listeners will appreciate it too. What you touched on it earlier, but closing out, what do you feel your purpose on the planet is?
I think that quite honestly, my purpose has been to educate children, to educate the community, the broader community, about the positive aspects about our cultural and ethnic group, and to try to reduce racism and bigotry. I think that those things, come through education. I can't cure anyone of a disease. I can't, repair bones that are fractured, but I can help to eliminate ignorance, and bigotry and racism are based in ignorance. And so that's kind of a lifelong mission.
I agree 100%, all based on ignorance there. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Flores, for being part of the show. I really, truly appreciate your time. We're going to put all the stuff in the show notes here at the end and the resources that you provided and the connect, how to connect with you and that. I really appreciate it. It's been amazing on here, and we'll see if we can do a part 2 some other time too. So I'll let you get out of here so you can open up shop, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you. Peace.
Yep. Bye-bye.